So what happens when a small group tries to control the whole government? So we're going to look at what James Madison has to say in Federalist number 58, and he warns about a danger that isn't talked about enough, and that is a powerful minority can hold a majority hostage if the rules of voting allow them. Now, Madison's solution, well, is a house that grows with the nation so that representation reflects real people and not entrenched power. I'm Matt Haskell. I'm a high school history and civics teacher, and we're making our way through all 85 of the Federalist Papers. We're up to number 58, and so let's go ahead and take a look here and set the stage of what Madison has to say. So this particular essay happens to respond to critics from the small states, like the ones that would have adhered to the New Jersey plan during the Constitutional Convention. And they were fearing that as the nation grew, like this is going to hurt the small states. The House would add more members. This hurts the small states. The large states would eventually dominate Congress. And they argued that the House would stop growing at some point, well, which it has, and that would freeze the balance of power forever. And Madison, in his essay, thinks all this is a trap. Now, you have to remember, this is all before the advent of political parties, or is what he would have referred to as faction. So it's still an essay of its time. Madison does think it's a trap, and it would be a trap that would destroy majority rule. So Madison's core argument here is kind of blunt in its approach. It's basically, in a republic, the majority must govern, not because they're always right, but because the alternative would lead to tyranny. So allowing a numerical minority to block the will of the majority turns this system upside down. And that freezing the size of the House of Representatives lets that minority keep the advantage permanently. Now, Madison goes on to argue why the House must keep growing. He gives some pretty practical reasons why the House must expand with the population. First off, he's like, hey, you know what? With more representation, there's chances for less corruption. If you have more districts, then you have more diverse viewpoints. If you have more voices, you have a more accurate reflection of the people. If you have larger assemblies, it's harder for special interests to hold on to things, to capture things. And a house that never grows becomes narrow, it becomes elite, rigid, and vulnerable. So the Constitution protects against this through a mandatory census and regular reapportionment. Now, I don't think Madison necessarily could see everything that would happen in our modern day with gerrymandering and the fact that the House has been, at 435 basically since I think it's 1929. So it's been a minute. But remember, this is an essay of its time. Now, when we look at the majority versus minority rule here, we're talking about a numerical situation here. We're not talking like a racial or ethnic minority here. So let's keep that in mind. A minority in opinion. Now, Madison will go on to tackle a pretty core principle of small r Republican government, and that is majority rule is not optional. It's essentially the backbone of the entire system. And so he warns that if a minority can block laws whenever it wants, the government becomes weak, divided, indecisive, and unstable. We kind of see that a little bit with the filibuster happening in the Senate, but hey, we're talking about the House right now. Let's not talk about that. Now, minority rule sounds like protection, but it also can actually mean paralysis. So some critics of the Constitution wanted laws to require more than a simple majority, like special majorities, like 2/3, 3/4, that kind of thing. And Madison's like, no, we need to reject that. Because when you have that, it lets the minority grind the system to a halt. And then it could invite foreign influence, it could encourage corruption, it could erase accountability, and then it could turn every vote into more of a bargaining chip. He cites examples from European confederacies where you had supermajorities that led to decades of dysfunction. Now, Madison goes on he attempts to try and flip the criticism on its head. That if you fear the majority, you should fear the minority even more. Because a minority that can block action can do things like prevent needed reforms. It could protect abuses. It could stop budgets. It could halt defense measures. It could hold the entire public hostage. And in short, when the minority rules, nobody rules, according to Madison. So Madison briefly revisits the idea of district knowledge going back to Federalist 56 that we talk about. And this is where more representation means more local perspectives, more accountability, and more accurate reflections of economic and geographic diversity. And so, to sum that up, a frozen House of Representatives, a gridlocked House of Representatives would lose that kind of connection, the three things I just listed. Now, if we look at Madison's reasoning and his logic behind number 58, we can come up with our 5 points that some of you are looking for here in the summary, right? It could have been a much shorter video. But anyway, first of all, the House must grow as the population grows. And a small House empowers a minority. A minority, well, the minority rule leads to paralysis and corruption. Supermajority requirements make it all worse. And then majority rule is essential for small r Republican government. So there's number 58, 5 easy steps. Now, his tone this time. In this one, he's unusually forceful in his wording in this particular essay. He warns that designing a system that lets a minority control outcomes it's not balanced. It's actually dangerous because democracy in practice requires responsiveness, flexibility, accurate representation, and then a House that reflects population realities. Anything else would lead to instability. And that's kind of like where we're at right now in our modern time with the idea that, hey, let's just not wait for the census. Let's redistrict now to keep one group in power. That's not supposed to be reflective of what's going on. That's more manipulation. Now, the moral dimension that Madison's trying to address here, it gets to a deeper point, and that is the majority deserves to govern because they are the people. Not a perfect people, mind you, not an infallible people, but the people nonetheless. And the alternative, which could be minority obstruction, breaks the social contract. A republic effectively dies, according to Madison's argument. A republic dies when the minority can veto everything the majority needs. Now, does this all, does it sound familiar? Today, like I mentioned, we've debated about filibusters and special majorities and minority obstruction, frozen House seats, unrepresented districts. These debates began all the way back in the late 1780s, and Federalist number 58 is Madison's warning that a republic must prevent minority rule or it becomes ungovernable. Now, our takeaways today would be that, one, the House must expand with population. It shouldn't stay at a fixed size. Two, majority rule is essential for a functioning republic. Three, minority obstruction threatens stability and justice. So I wrap this one up today. Number 58 reminds us that democracy is not simply the absence of kings. It's actually the presence of majoritarian decision-making. Did I just make that up? Majoritarian? Anyway, minorities deserve protection. We need to protect minority opinion and listen to minority opinion. But they deserve the protection, but not control. So a House of Representatives that is frozen at a fixed size, or if it's saddled with endless supermajority rules, betrays the very idea of small r Republican government. And Madison's lesson is rather blunt and pretty clear. Let the majority rule and let representation rise with the nation. Okay? Hey, appreciate you hanging around here if you made it this far. And if this one helps you, if this episode helped you see the importance of majority rule, please take some time to share it with a friend or, share it with a classmate or something like that. Join me around for Federalist number 59. I'll get to that one tomorrow. This is where Alexander Hamilton enters the chat. He comes back, and this time he's going to explain who controls federal elections themselves. All right? Hey, thanks around again. This was a long one, but appreciate it.